Hi everyone. If you've been here before, welcome back to my channel. If you're new, just welcome. I'm Brittany Shanae, and it's been quite some time since I've posted a video on my YouTube channel, and um, I have struggled with being consistent on this channel, and I recently came into the realization as to why. At the beginning of this year, 2024, I was processing a lot of stuff. Um, I had just recently gone through a second move where my husband and I had moved to San Diego, and we had found this really nice apartment, and I love that apartment. But the facility that we live in had some hidden fees, and things had sort of became a little too financially stressful at the time. And so we decided to downsize in the same facility. And this is less than ideal because, I realized that I just really needed space. And the place that we are in now, still beautiful, but it is relatively smaller. And that was a big adjustment. And it was really getting to me, and I wasn't really sure why I was feeling so strongly about it. Fast forward several months after that move happened in August of last year. Fast forwarding several months, my aunt passed away. And she was my, dare I say, my favorite aunt, my closest aunt. But truth be told, our closeness had kind of waned a little bit over the last several years. And I won't get into all the reasons why, but I was feeling that separation, and it was also doing something to me that in the last days of her life, we weren't as close as I felt like we were before. And when she passed, it wasn't a surprise because she was battling cancer and I think some other things for a while. Um, but while I expected myself to experience grief and frustration for both of these really big changes, um, it was also happening just at the time where I was in the middle of getting a new job. And the job had a very tedious interviewing process, a 5-step interview process. I had to go through 5 different interviews to officially get the job. And my start date was postponed because of the funeral. So all of this was happening very close to each other. I was making do in the public eye in terms of, I show up to the funeral and, I cried, of course, and I was expressing emotion about that grief and, honest to my husband about the situation of, just feeling frustrated with having to move into a smaller space and trying not to be a brat about it. But I was just feeling these really intense feelings, and I couldn't figure out why I was feeling that way. And it was a familiar feeling, a feeling I had felt before. But I knew while it's okay to grieve and it's okay to feel emotions, as someone who is very much steeped in the work of like psycho emotional well being, I felt like something more was going on that I was dealing with, and I just didn't have the language for it. Well, some time had went by, and for the longest, I had been really identifying as a highly sensitive person. And I'm aware that I also have been dealing with complex PTSD as someone who has several traumatic stories in her history and things that she's had to overcome. I just recognize that, like, yeah, there will be some things that will be more challenging to deal with. But with all the tools that I've employed and with all the practices that I've gained, like the work that I do as a massage therapist and as a yoga instructor and as a coach, it was just like something just kept feeling like there's something extra here that I'm not understanding. Well, I was following a person who is, I think she's a therapist also, but she's definitely a coach, and she coaches highly sensitive people. And she came out with some content that was questioning whether high sensitivity or the highly sensitive person is a profile for autism. And I had never considered myself having autism before that. And so that kind of sparked my curiosity, and I decided to do some research. I poured myself into the research, and so much of the content, not just on social media, but just like articles and studies and things, was really resonating with me. And and putting all of that together, I decided to seek professional help, and so I did. And after a couple of months of being assessed and going to sessions with this therapist who specializes in working with neurodivergent people and who is neurodivergent herself, she was able to confirm for me that I am also on the autism spectrum. Um, there is a lot that has come with the process of embracing that as a, not so much as a diagnosis. I know that that's the term used, you're diagnosed with it. But for me, and I know there are people who have higher support needs than I do, who are what used to be considered level 2, level 3, who are on the more intense or severe side of the spectrum, who just require a lot more, and their autism traits are a lot more obvious to people and are more in alignment with what most people understand to be autism. As for me, I recognize that I for the most part have been able to pass as a neurotypical person ish. I've always been considered weird and quirky and gifted and all of these things, and only to reflect back on my life and to realize that there were so many other things outside of my giftedness that I was really struggling with, right? There was the benefit of doing really well academically in school. Even when I was in elementary school, I was reading at a 12th grade level, or actually college level. And I've always had a natural aptitude for music. I have, like I can hear perfect pitch. I've always had like natural music ability in terms of singing and just being able to play things by ear, which in my research, I found is something that is actually like pretty common for people with autism. And that's one of the ways that the traits show up, is because of our sensory sensitivity. Some of us are able to use that to the advantage of having these different gifts. And I've been pretty aware of that for a long time in terms of how those things were gifts for me, but not fully understanding the neurology behind the gifts, and why those gifts seem to come with a lot of challenges. And those challenges have led to a lot of health issues, which I've talked about on this channel before, and I've since, I think, archived the videos, or I've just saved them privately. And that was just because I feel like for my channel, I was having a really hard time streamlining my conscious thought and creating something here that felt like it was about something specific that I could share knowledge with. And I was kind of all over the place with it. Like sometimes I was doing vlogs about self-care. Sometimes I was, doing yoga videos. Sometimes I was doing tarot videos, and all of these things have a place together, right? They're all very similar to one another in terms of self-care in a holistic way. And spiritual self-care, physical self-care, mental health care, all of those things in terms of taking care of the self and from within and without. All of these things are very much connected in the way that I use them. However, I felt like I needed to be more specific, and I was having a hard time being specific because I do have a wide range of interests, and I'm not always sure how to convey that to my audience. Sometimes I'm not even sure how to fully convey it to myself. But in the past, I just kind of pushed through and I would do my best. But even reflecting on my old videos, I kind of noticed that like there was always this angst that came with recording, of feeling like I couldn't fully be myself because I stutter, or because sometimes my stream of consciousness does kind of like diverge out into different lines of thought that sometimes seems difficult to try to concisely put together in order to create content. And even now, although I am boldly making an effort to just allow myself to just show up in the grittiness of however I show up, whatever that means, whatever that looks like. I noticed that when there's a camera, there's just a struggle in the midst of being perceived to show up 100% myself. And as I was getting assessed for autism, I began to recognize that, like, oh, that's because of I'm so used to masking. And I didn't realize that I was masking. I've always known that I felt like I had to work harder in order to show up into social spaces in a way that didn't seem to put people off or cause people to give me the side eye. But even in my efforting, I realized that that would happen anyway. And I couldn't really figure out why. I just thought, well, I'm just weird. I'm just quirky, all the things that people would call me. And I didn't necessarily, what was I thinking just now? So now that I have the knowledge of that, I still have a desire to create content, but now that I have this information, I'm able to work better with myself instead of against myself, and to allow myself to do things in a way that feels good for me, not in a way that I think it's supposed to be done based off of what I've seen in terms of other creators or what people say, well, this is how you do it, this is what you're supposed to do. I've noticed that often what people say is, this is what you're supposed to do, only that works to a degree, but at the end of the day, I have to find out what works for me. And there's a few different things that I've noticed ever since learning about my autism, or since my autism realization. I prefer to say, other than late diagnosis, I'll just say late realization. But late realization in this, I've recognized that there are a few different things that I hadn't allowed myself to do in making content before. That is probably why it used to feel so stressful to try to do sustainably. For one, I always felt like I had to look at the camera. I had to look at my audience. I had to be able to, and honestly, because this is a front-facing camera that I'm using, looking at myself, actually find it to be really distracting, because then I start to kind of critique how I look. And when I say how I look, just kind of more like my mannerisms, my facial expressions, like, is it coming off a certain way? Like, I just can get a little extra super detailed and over analytical when I am looking at the product as it's being made, versus being able to just kind of be in my brain space as I'm creating, because in a non-distracted way. So I'm giving myself permission to not look directly at the camera. And I know that there are other creators, other neurodivergent creators, who have said that they've had people in the audience who have critiqued that. And I'm just going to let you guys know right now, I'm going to do what's comfortable for me so that I can continue to show up in the most authentic way that I can show up. And if it's not your jam, that's cool. There are plenty of other creators who are willing to accommodate you on that. But I am going to be using this as a way for me to show up in a way that works for me. I have spent a lot of time accommodating other people to my own detriment, which is a reason why I have faced so many medical issues. I realized that the stress of trying to people please and trying to fit into my environment, opposed to creating or finding an environment that was more conducive for my health and well-being, that has led to a lot of stress and strain that I'm paying for now. And I think that some of it is probably permanent, and it is okay. It is what it is. The damage is done, but I'm also recognizing that this entire experience is one that I've needed. Now, the way that my neurodivergent mind works is that I tend to see things through a very, very spiritual / energetic lens, which means that for me, even the pain of the medical ailments that I'm facing, even the pain of learning that, I was a people pleaser, or that I had a neurological condition that wasn't really fully accommodated. And yet I've still survived. I'm still here, and I'm learning from it. I realize that's where my wisdom has come from, that path was meant for me to walk for me to be able to see myself through that struggle, to look back and go, oh wow, I'm resilient as fuck. Like I've been able to overcome a lot. And without that story, I probably would not have known my own strength. And I'm super grateful for that. And also, there is this grieving process that comes with realizing that, like, man, all these years I was not accommodated. And when I reflect back on certain comments and conversations from my family, I realized that there were signs that were picked up, but they weren't necessarily attributed to autism, or they just thought, well, she'll figure it out, she'll work it out, she'll figure out how to cope. I will say, unfortunately, but of course, it's all a part, I believe, of the divine plan for my life, or what needed to happen in order for me to grow and to mature and to accumulate the wisdom that I've had through the unfortunate experience of finding very unhealthy ways to cope, and doing so in secret for a portion of my life, where it's like, a lot of people didn't know that I've struggled with addiction and in different forms, in different fashions, and perhaps I will make some content talking more about that, because I think that there is so much nuance in the neurodivergent experience. And I think that addictive behavior, or what we see as addictive behavior, is one of those things that we get a chance to explore, that I'm definitely giving myself a chance to explore. Again, right now, I don't know if my stream of thought is making as much sense as I think it's making right now. But again, I'm just really using this content creation as a way for me to become more comfortable with myself, to allow my natural traits to come to the surface and be expressed without me over analyzing or saying, like, okay, you have to sit here, you have to be straight, you have to have good posture, you have to wear makeup, and you have to look directly at the camera, and you have to know exactly what you want to say, and you have to ... And instead of shooting on myself, I would much rather just be like, I get to be however the fuck I show up in the moment. And that's essentially what I want people to see, is who I am in the moment. I realize that when we mask as neurodivergent people, and we all wear masks as a human being, I think that we all do that to some degree. We're all playing this game of life and trying to do the best with what we got. And there are some people who are able to make their innate personalities work, or there are some neurodivergent people, specifically autistic people, who have no choice, where they just show up themselves, like they just cannot change. And I think that those people are amazing and important and crucial, actually, to our society, and an opportunity for us to learn how to allow people to just show up as themselves, and to not take things so personally, and to reap the wisdom from that display, from that example of, this person can't do anything but be themselves, and look at the beauty that they're able to create in their own experience and in the experience of others by showing up authentically, even though they may not check some of the social boxes or status boxes or intellect boxes or whatever boxes that we have that we feel like give somebody value. But we are valuable. Each of us are valuable by our sheer existence. But when you don't realize that about yourself as a neurodivergent person, we mask. We mask for safety, because people may respond to us in ways that we don't understand or that we don't intend. And I know I've had my share of that in every setting, whether it was at home, in spiritual settings, at church, in social communities, at school, and I've had a lot of great experience, a lot of positive experiences where people really respond to me in a wonderful way. And I love that. But it's two sides of one coin. There's the good, or the pleasant rather, and then there's the very much unpleasant aspect of this experience. And as I am in my unmasking process, which is something that I really want to do in my art and in my creating, I realize that in the world, there's still a mask that I'll have to wear simply for safety and for my own comfort, because I recognize that, like, not everybody needs to know that I'm dealing with something in a moment. Not everyone needs to see the raw, uncut Brittany all the time. And I say that as someone who is living in my own experience. I can't speak for what other people need to do in their own lives, but I know for the work that I do, I work in communities, underserved communities, and I realize that there is a certain level of authenticity that I still get to carry with me. But there's also the willing sacrifice of managing my own display when I'm working with people who are receiving my help or receiving my services, especially children who sometimes need the extra mile and effort of us getting past our own stuff and our own comforts because they're so fresh and so new and know so little about the world that they're in, and also wanting to nurture their authenticity. And sometimes we as adults can get so caught up in, well, this is what I need, right? And we can get really selfish, especially if somebody wasn't accommodating for us and didn't nurture our authenticity, and we can get really hell bent on the I. And one thing that I never want to do, and something that I do again as a spiritual explorer, is to constantly reflect on myself and how I show up. And not in a, well, I got to change to make other people feel better, but more so in a, I want to be the type of person who shows up in a way that is not harmful. And as someone who practices yoga and also has faith in the Tao, I just recognize that, like, I still, even without being able to control my neurology, I still get to manage my being to the extent of being conscious of whether or not I am causing harm to myself or people around me. And in allowing myself to gauge where the balance of that is. And it's different from situation to situation. It's different depending on what phase in my life I'm in. As a 35-year-old, like I didn't get I didn't come into my realization until after 35. And so I've lived quite a bit of life not realizing exactly what was going on with me. So as I'm unmasking, I'm learning more about myself too. And so what all of that looks like in terms of how I want to show up and who I want to be and how I create and what my authenticity looks like, I realize is going to be an ongoing process for the duration of my life. And essentially what I feel like a big part of my purpose is here in this lifetime is to be transparent, to be an example of transparency as it relates to this experience, and also to hold space when I can for others to do the same, to find their own voice, to find their own authenticity, and to grow confident in that. So I know that's a lot, and to be honest, I'm not even really sure how much value this particular video has, because my life is still adjusting to this new information, and I don't know what things are going to look like going forward. But I think that instead of waiting for this proverbial destination to be reached in terms of, oh, I'm this confident neurodivergent person who I had a past of difficulty, but now everything is a-okay. Instead, I realized that, like, I'm going to always be learning something new. I'm going to always be going through some sort of grieving or death process in terms of the old fading away and embracing new knowledge, new understanding, new ways of doing things, new ways of relating to people in my life, new standards that I'm setting, new boundaries that I'm setting, new approaches to my health and well-being, constantly adapting and changing things. And one of the things that I love about being a neurodivergent person with this flavor of of processing is that, like, I'm always looking for the most efficient way to do something. And so for me, it's all about trial and error. I love being a little scientist slash artist in my own life, in that I get to try things on, see how they work, see why they work in the situations that they do, and to allow that to guide me forward, right? And so I'm essentially learning how to accommodate myself, because other people around me may not know how to accommodate me, and they may not be able to accommodate me even if they want to, right? And I do have loved ones in my life who are still learning how to relate to me and how to accommodate me in my unique neurodivergence. And I'm also still learning how to show up to be the best friend, the best partner, the best family member, the best, coworker, the best employee that I can be, the best leader I can in the situations and the spaces in which I'm doing that, the best space holder that I can possibly be in each moment, in each situation, because I'm informed and because I do the work. And so, yeah, I just really want my content to be around doing the work as a neurodivergent person who's trying to navigate the social emotional landscape of this society that we're in, Western society, and in the world, because there's neurodivergent people everywhere. But and I would love to be able to connect with other neurodivergent people who are experiencing, interesting things in their own navigating of their experience in their social climates. And yeah, I'm thinking ahead. But I'm really just looking forward to seeing what comes of me just shooting the shot, doing the thing, not overthinking it, allowing myself to take breaks, allowing myself to look off camera, allowing myself to stem, allowing myself to pause and take breaks, allowing myself to have lulls in between content creating if I need the break, and to not be so hard on myself in the background about how much I'm not able to produce because of how this colonial capitalism is forcing people into this mindset of like, I have to create for everyone else. I have to present, I have to give, I have to make so that I can hopefully receive stuff back. I don't want to react that way. I want to create for the fuck's sake of creating, because it brings me joy. And if it helps somebody, even the more, even better. So yeah, I guess I don't have much else to say. I'm just going to let it be that for now. And a few things, though, I will just say that I would like to do, and maybe I'm just sharing this with you all because if I put it out there, it's a way that I hold myself accountable, is that I want to pick my podcast back up, the Awkward Aries podcast. It had kind of started to go in one direction, and then I was having a hard time landing on exactly what I wanted to do. And now I understand why I was so confused, is because I was really working against myself in terms of what I wanted to do. I kept trying to narrow down things, but I'm a person who, while I have a umbrella of things that I'm into, I am also very wide range. I have a very wide range of interests. And so I'm just going to allow myself to lean into all of those interests, no matter how minuscule or off topic they may seem. Off topic, I believe that a part of my gift is that I can connect the dots on things that seem like they are completely non-related at all, and be able to relate them to each other. If anyone who is familiar with the idea of fractals, how it's like a thing within a thing within a thing within a thing, but it's all interconnected. A lot of people use the mycelium network of mushrooms as an example of that, but essentially it's like, while that species of mushroom and that tree and over there across regions may seem like they are separate and different, but they're actually the same and actually quite connected, by this network and through the communication style of that species and of that form of life. And I think that we all have a unseen connection to each other, and that's why when a lot of life events happen, it's not so crazy. It's not so crazy to see how it's like, oh, this is actually just like that. We're really just watching a bunch of patterns play out over and over and over again. Very similar to what's explained in the Matrix. And I can feel myself kind of like going off into this like tangent thing, and maybe I'll allow myself to do that in a different video. But for now, I'm gonna leave it there. But yes, I want to hold myself accountable to do this podcast. And in general, I want to create more. I want to sing more. I want to make music, which is something that has been on my heart to do for a long time. But my relationship with music is a story within itself. And maybe I'll save that for a different video as well. But I find myself wanting to respark that flame, and rekindle the magic that I used to have with listening and participating in the making of music. And also just allowing myself to talk, allowing myself to rant, allowing myself to go on my neurodivergent tangents, and letting my stream of thought run away with me, and letting you all have a front seat to that, because I think that it actually is a pretty foundational part of who I am and how I operate and how I process information. And it's something that I mostly do when I'm alone, because talking to other people, people can get overwhelmed. That's a pretty common report. Or people don't care about what I have to talk about. And I talk about things that go over a lot of people's heads. And I don't say that in like a egotistical way. I say that in a way of like it can be very difficult actually to communicate and to connect with people, because the things that really spark joy and enthusiasm in me are things that other people may deem stupid or silly or like I don't get it or even problematic, especially when it comes to the realm of spirituality and how religion kind of creates a divide in people being able to communicate their spiritual values with one another, and folks can get really defensive about that. And I get it, because I come from the world of religion, and I understand how strong the passion for whatever your belief is can be, and how much that can enter into all aspects of your life, especially of how you relate to other people, because it impacts how you relate to yourself. And that's something that I want to talk about as well on this channel. And so I think that instead of maybe talking my husband's ear off or trying to hopefully find the one friend who will let me just ramble about all of this crap and who can give me the feedback that I want, it's like maybe this is an opportunity for me to create content and to just put it out there, and then whoever it resonates with, I get to be in conversation with you all. And I think that I'm cool with that. I'm all right with that. Or at least I am cool with giving it a shot and see what happens if I allow myself to be more consistent and more transparent, instead of trying to critique and edit myself too much. I only plan to edit to the extent of making sure that this is coherent or cohesive, and that the flow of what I'm saying makes sense. And so there would be some edits here and there, but generally speaking, I want to feel like I don't have to over edit my videos, and that you all just get to see me and how I show up and how my mind works and who I am, because I feel like a lot of people in my life don't really get to see this side of me. And so sometimes in person it can be hard because of a lot of different factors. I know for me, talking in person to people, because of some of the like social demands that we don't always think about, like making eye contact or noticing when people aren't really receptive to what it is that you have to say, or they're not really listening to your words. They hear what they want to hear, or they're just quick to respond, or whatever the case may be. That can be very difficult for me to remain regulated in those conversations where I'm noticing all of those things. And my natural inclination is to kind of just stop, just shut down, and like, okay, well, you're not receptive, so why should I keep going? Because it's too stressful for me to try to like beat my fist up against a brick wall. If you don't want to receive the information, then I certainly don't want to be one to try to impose it on you. And so that can be tough. And so these one-way conversations that can later on get feedback, I feel like may be a great way for me to learn how to express or just practice expressing, to people, to the public, in my own way without having to worry about that part, And now I know the internet is the internet and it has its savage moments. And so while there's that part that I've considered as well, and I think has also contributed to my lack of consistency, is being worried about how other people may perceive me, or clips that they may take to try to paint a narrative because they're upset about something I said, or just because they're looking for their own content, and willing to throw other people under the bus just so that they can catch attention from whoever it is they want to catch attention from. And that's not really something I want to get wrapped in, but I also know that that's not something I can totally control. I just have to be myself and know what my intentions are and hope for the best. Because I think another assignment for me, again, speaking from a spiritual sense, is learning how to just have faith in the process. And that whatever happens, whether it's some savage bullshit on the internet, or whether it's just, no one giving a shit about my thoughts, or maybe everyone giving a shit about my thoughts, because that's a possibility too, is, how will I handle that? And I'll just handle it as I've handled everything up until this point, as a neurodivergent person who didn't know she was autistic until after 35, and who has suffered a great deal socially, physically, and psychologically and emotionally because of that, but who is also so fucking resilient that she still managed to come out pretty well in her life. And I know there's more life to live, and this is a way in which I want to continue to make this life more well-rounded and fulfilling for me as I continue on this living journey. So for those of you who decide to join me, thank you. I appreciate you. Feel free to share your stories if you're a neurodivergent person, or a late realization or late diagnosed autistic person, or a person with autism, however you like to refer to that. Or if you're even ADHD, that has not yet been confirmed for me, but that's something my specialist and I are currently working on as well. It's in conversation. And so as I am continuing to share these things about myself, feel free to share your stories if this feels like a safe and appropriate place for you to do so. I encourage you all to be kind to each other in the comments. Be kind to yourself in the comments, and recognize that, like, we're all people just having a conversation here, and nobody's perfect. Nobody knows everything. All we know is what we know. And what we know, we must realize that even in the midst of our gifts and the things that we're able to see, I know for me, I do have an advantage of, because the way I'm able to calculate information, I'm able to predict things in terms of, like, people. I don't always connect with people very well, but I am able to see a lot of people's patterns in how they behave. And even with that information, though, I have to be careful and recognize that I don't know everyone's ins and outs. I didn't even know my own ins and outs until just more recently, and I'm still figuring that out. So please keep that in mind, is that, while we may see people's words or even hear people's words, like in the video here on this platform and on any platform, we don't know each other, right? And if your mission is to just be a troll, yeah, I'll do my due diligence, and I'll be removing that from the space. Maybe, sometimes trolls are good to address too, but also just, don't come on here being an asshole. This isn't the space for that. But also be honest about your own experiences and your own thoughts. But yeah, I'm gonna stop rambling now. Thank you all who has tuned in so far. And I hope to be able to provide more content in the future for the sake of experience and for the sake of creating. And so for those who are here to join, welcome aboard. I appreciate you.